welcome back to another edition of Research Fantasy presents our NBA Fantasy Baller DFS edition for Wednesday, April 26, 2017. For those of you who don't know me, I'm your host, Nick from CWE, from all of your favorite daily fantasy sites. And I'm here to talk the remaining first round games in the NBA playoff. Things are starting to level out here. As of last night, Houston finished the series with OKC, meaning that we now have 3 of 8 series in the books. San Antonio and Utah both managed to go up 3-2 in their respective series. And tonight we've got 2 games on the slate, both of which are knotted up at 2-2. Both have been pretty good series, and I think that, it's a good night for fantasy basketball, despite the fact that there's only 2 games on the slate. Starting things off with Atlanta and Washington. Atlanta was probably pretty happy to see Dwight Howard actually come out and decide to play basketball for the first time this series. I mean, I can't really pinpoint what exactly had been wrong for Howard, but it's not good for the Wizards if he's able to turn that machine up and keep it going at this level and maybe even more. Paul Millsap continues to be, the focus of this team, which is how it should be. So Millsap is definitely the main target here. Howard is still priced at a position where there's a ton of room for upside. Just depends on whether you believe or not that he's going to be able to consistently deliver this type of stat line. He should be able to, quite honestly. I mean, he's an uber talented player, even at this stage in his career. So I don't see any reason why we shouldn't have some Dwight Howard in at least some of our tournament lineups. Dennis Schroeder, still on the radar, play kind of trending in a little bit of a negative direction at this point. But he's still going to be very necessary for this team to win, so I don't mind playing him. Outside of that, I'm not buying into too much of Kent Bazemore's strong performance, and Taurean Prince still remains priced at a point where he could definitely exceed value, but just hasn't. I think maybe once this series has done it, but kind of the upside has been he's floated, 19.2, 17.3, 19.9, needing 21.5 points to hit value. I mean, that's not killer, especially in a situation where not a ton of guys going over that 5x with regular frequency. So don't hate Taurean Prince. Outside of that, I'm pretty much off of everyone else. Moving on to the Washington side of the basketball, for me, it's still John Wall. John Wall had his worst game of this series, and that still accounted for 41 fantasy points. Back home, I expect him to be back over the 50-point mark, so he makes a pretty strong play tonight. Really, outside of him, things get a little bit testy for this group. I'd say Bradley Beal has been the next most consistent 3 out of 4 times. He's floated around his value and actually 2 of 4 times he's exceeded it. So I think he's a guy we can look at. But in terms of Otto Porter, Kelly Oubre, Markieff Morris, Marcin Gortat, just really a lot of difficulty buying in. I guess Gortat would be my favorite because he actually has hit value 3 of 4 times. I guess it just seems like he hasn't done as well as one might think. Markieff Morris has proved to basically be a bust outside of that first game. Otto Porter, 4,800, not the worst route that you can go, especially since he could put up some peripheral stats that can really help you out. I mean, if he has a game where he has 3 or 4 steals, he's almost certain to hit value at that price. So I don't hate that. In the regular season, we would have been fawning over a $4,800 Otto Porter. So again, kind of hard to look the other way. Outside of that, the Brandon Jennings train has slowed down pretty quickly. Not to say he should be off your radar because he's a guy who could put up points really quick, but I think he could do better elsewhere. All right, now we've got Chicago and in Boston. Really interesting development overnight, and I guess it's not really overnight, but this is the first that I've seen it, is Rondo is preparing to try to play in this game, which to me is extremely interesting. Now, whether he does or not is a different story. This could be a bad situation for the Bulls if they allow him to play without going through the proper channels of injury. I know it sounds like something that is unfathomable in this day and age in professional sports, but I believe the Seahawks in the NFL got punished for something like this with Richard Sherman, where they failed to disclose, some type of an injury, and they lost, I think, a draft pick. I don't think it was a high draft pick, but even a fourth-round draft pick. And, any round draft pick is a guy who could turn into something. So, kind of monitor that situation throughout the day. My gut reaction seems awfully weird that it seems weird that he would be able to play in this game. His coach is indicating that he's not going to play. We'll see. Whatever's going on in Rondo's head in reality, most likely are two entirely different things altogether. That being said, this has really diminished the overall effectiveness of the Bulls on the basketball court. They have dropped both games at home, and the scores, 104-87, 104-95. Not the biggest deficits, but certainly not, something that you're excited about. Jimmy Butler, main guy going right here. Pretty much the only guy I'm looking at on this team, because everyone else at home just really started to play like they were outclassed. I'd love to say, hey, Robin Lopez, great price point on him. But his production hasn't been there. Bobby Portis, again, decent punt option, especially if Mirotic struggles, which, he hasn't been horrible, but he hasn't been great. Dwayne Wade, probably one of the more disappointing players on this team. Really thought he'd be doing a little bit more. Wouldn't surprise me if he turned it on. And then, if we're assuming Rondo's going to miss, as much as I hate to say it, and it could be a trap all day, but, Isaiah Cannon slated to start 1,800 on FanDuel. He gave you 23.9 fantasy points in 34 minutes last time out. It's a toss-up with what could actually happen here. Cannon was a guy who played about 0 minutes a game throughout the regular season. I really don't. If Rondo's not going to play and they're committed to him, it's, he's a guy who could get you 10x pretty easily with that amount of time, so I don't hate it. Moving on to the Boston side of things, I think Isaiah Thomas comes into this thing, and especially without Rondo, sits in a good position, price 9,100 on FanDuel. I think that's something he can still beat. Al Horford, triple-double threat each and every time he steps foot onto the court. For the most part, has been, floating around where he should be points-wise. He had one down game. I don't mind looking his direction. A lot of these other guys, priced a little more than you want to pay. Jay Crowder at 59 has some upside. Avery Bradley I think is just too expensive for my taste. Same with Marcus Smart. I think they're just a little too much unless you're looking for someone who's going to get 4x value. Gerald Green has performed in one of his starts, so he's a risky option. It really just comes down to playing the guys you feel comfortable with. This is a slate where Isaiah Cannon may work perfectly, because he allows you, if you play him, the amount of you can spend per player jumps to 72, 75. That might not sound like a lot, but as you're building your lineups, if you're able to put in a couple of other guys who've been playing well, who might not be priced way out there, you'd be surprised how many studs you'll be able to fit in around them. That'll wrap it up today. Thanks for listening. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel below. Head over to researchfantasy.com. Sign up for our NBA mailing list. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter at Research and Win. And join us again tomorrow.